Hey everyone, it is Mavens of Manufacturing Day, and I'm super excited because not only is it International Women's Day today, but we have DeIla Ray with us, and I'm super excited to hear her story. But I do have to say a huge thank you to our sponsor today, Sandvik Coromant, who will have a message for you after this episode, so make sure you stay tuned for their message. But DeIla, how are you doing? It's so nice to see you.
Hi, Megan. So glad to be here on Mavens of Manufacturing with you. I have been waiting for this with you, so I'm excited to get into the talk.
Well, and I'm super excited too that it's International Women's Month and it's International Women's Day, because we have so many women in our sector that are making history right now in all of the industries that have been predominantly male for quite some time, but we have a lot of women up and coming and doing some fantastic things. And I believe you're one of those women as well too, because you're just setting the bar for welders everywhere. So I really appreciate you being here, and I thank you. So I want to give you a chance to kind of give us some background information on yourself. So who is DeIla Ray, and what should people know about you?
Sure. So I have a very non-traditional approach to the industry. I didn't go to school for welding. I had no experience in welding. I didn't go to a vocational school. I didn't go to a post-secondary school. After I graduated high school, I was on the fast track to college because that's what my counselor said that I should do. I was going for nursing. And I started getting C's. I started getting low grades. I was wasting money. And I was, had a moment of clarity where I was like, I should probably be a little more focused before I keep wasting money if I'm not going to get better grades. So I had stepped out of the school world for a while, about 2 years. And then I had did my enrollment to get back into doing my degree. I had switched from nursing to psychology. And so I was in the process of getting back into my degree and finishing out my college. And my husband's work, he was traveling as a pipe fitter at the time. His company was looking for people's help in the office. I honestly, Megan, more times than not, I forget to even talk about the fact that when I first started in industry, I was in the office. I go straight to being that I was a fire watch, but I always skip over this. So I'm actually going to tell the story correct this time. I started in the office, basically doing attendance, making sure that the employees were there, and helping, set up for the OSHA 10 testing that the employees were coming in to take. And then they needed help in the weld log office of all offices to put me in. So then I was in the weld log office, tracking the welds that were complete, welds that needed repairs. So really getting a feel for what the welders were doing. And then that's when I saw welding for the first time. Before that, it was literally in the movies. I'd never seen it before. And it was an immediate hook. I was attached. I was obsessed with it. I needed more time with it. I needed to know everything I could. And so I invested as much time as I could. I kept asking questions. Any break I had, I was working during break. Any days off I had, I was working during my days off. And I just kept working until I felt confident enough to take a welding test. I took my first welding test and I failed it. And guess what? Usually a lot of people will leave at that point. They don't keep trying for some reason. And I wasn't letting that stop me. I knew I was new at it with no experience. So I just kept going. And I was able to pass my first structure test, and I became a structure welder. And then I kept practicing and I became a pipe welder. I earned my Section 9 certifications through the American Society of I'm messing this up. The ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, if I can say that. I got my Section 9 certification for pipe welding, and then I had my American Welding Society D11 certifications for structure welding. So from there, I went into stick and TIG welding and traveled across the United States, all the way from North Dakota down to Texas to Louisiana and everywhere in between, working in refineries, compressor stations, water treatment and wastewater treatment facilities, any place that I could get into and weld pipe. And it became a passion. It became an obsession. I was chasing that all-American dream, essentially. My husband and I, we traveled with our camper. We pulled our camper with our truck, and then we had another truck that we pulled a pull behind trailer with, where we housed all of our tools. And so as the years progressed, we worked for about 9 years together in the industry and decided, why aren't we doing this for ourselves? Why are we working for someone else? We have all the tools, all of the knowledge. We need to try to spread our wings a little more. And so we LLC'd right when COVID hit, which was probably not timing, right? Exactly. You can't really plan for that. And so it was a struggle. Thankfully, my husband and I wear many hats. So not only me being a welder and him being a journeyman pipe fitter, we also own and operate a tattoo and piercing studio. So we thankfully had a source of income to fall back on during the COVID world, though it was interesting in that realm as well during COVID. But while I was there, while I was at our studio here in town doing piercings, is when I had a young lady come in, and she said her and her dad told me that there was a position open at the Career Center here in town for a welding instructor, and that they were turning students away. And I was like, that's crazy. I don't want to be a teacher. Months went by. I see them again. They're like, DeIla, what are you doing? You need to get up to the Career Center. These students need you. And I was like, well, maybe I'll check it out. Like, what do you mean? So I looked into it. It fast-tracked. I had an informal interview, the next day a formal interview, and I was hired the following day. And I've been here now 2 years as the welding instructor at the Davis H. Hart Career Center in Mexico, Missouri. And to say out loud that I love teaching is something that I would never have thought I would say. I've said before in the past, and now I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So seeing my history and where I started and where I'm at now, it has been awesome. It has been trying. It has been, am I doing this? Should I be doing this? Can I do this? It has been the uphill and the downhill battle the whole way, but trade it for the world, and now I get to share it with students. So
I think that's awesome. Like, one of the things you said before, like, it became an obsession with you. So what is it specifically about? I have so many things I want to touch on from your history, but what is it specifically about welding that just makes it the thing for you? Like, is it the sparks? Is it the smell? Is it the travel? Is it the challenges? Like,
it's a lot of stuff. It is a variety of what you said, Megan. It's the traveling. I absolutely loved the traveling. It was scary at first. It was very unknown, because you don't know how long you're going to be at a job for. You don't know how many hours you're working. A lot of times as I'm traveling to another state to take a test, I don't even know what I'm testing on until I get there. And so it was a very unknown, show up and can you do it kind of industry. I don't know. There's something about just putting my hood down, looking through my little 2x4 lens. Everybody else disappears. And then I get to basically create art. TIG welding, gas tungsten arc welding is my true obsession. It is art. It is just, we're teaching it right now. That's what I have my students working on out in the shop, is TIG welding. And I've talked about now for the first semester how much I love TIG, and we did stick welding for the first semester. Now we're in TIG, and they're like, Mrs. Ray, I get it now. I don't want to do anything else but TIG welding. And I'm like, that's awesome. We're going to do it all in here. But the money's great.
Your experience, you said you had to show up and test. So your experience of traveling, like, how many states have you been to? And do you have to do a test in each different state, or is there like a standard for welders, specific welders all over? Is that question? Am I making sense?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I get what you're asking. So the amount of states that I've been to, I've worked in North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, Kansas, Texas, Louisiana, Missouri.
Wow.
Mostly Midwest corridor is really where I've stayed, all the way north to all the way south, 30 miles to the Canadian border, all the way down to New Orleans, right? So a pretty big spread in that corridor. As for testing, that really depends. It kind of varied. So in order to get hired by a company, you have to first take a welding test and then pass.
Gotcha.
And then sometimes within that same company, say company sent me to job site A, they tested me for job site A. Once I'm done testing and doing my work there, say that same company wants to send me to another state, to another job site, or in the same state to a different job site. Sometimes the client, the people that own the refinery that I'm going to do pipe welding at, the client will ask that the welders are tested. So it may be my company wanting certain testing that I do, or the client that our company is working for may require certain type of testing. I actually heard on the radio a few months ago, this has got to be accurate, right? But I heard on the radio a few months ago that welders are tested more than doctors over their lifespan of their work. You know, in a doctor's world, I suppose you're in school for your whole life. So you're testing and testing, and now you're a doctor, and now you do your doctor's work. As a welder, it doesn't matter if I've worked for 1 year or if I've worked for 50 years, I will be tested every job, every new company. You know, it can really vary. Some will test more. I've seen folks be with the same company for a few years and only ever test once they enter that company. So some companies are a little more severe.
That makes sense, though. I mean, because you're probably welding things that it's not done correctly. It could be pretty catastrophic. So you want to make sure the welders know what they're doing, and they're strong welders, if that, because if you have any like malfunctions in that weld, you don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's get back to your teaching journey, because when I first met you, it was at an Empowering Women in event in Chicago, which I almost did not go to because my GPS led me on a freaking roller coaster of a ride, and I was underground, and I got super anxious, and I almost went home, and I'm so glad I didn't.
I remember
but
that.
I was like, where are the drinks? Like, I just need a drink. But no, you mentioned something about your first year teaching, and I just thought this was really cool, and I want you to share that story. But when you started teaching, there's only two. Was there two or one girl in the welding class? And then what happened?
Two. Yeah, there was just a few. And so I'm not saying it's a me thing. I'm not saying I have this power. I'm simply saying that perhaps my presence, me just being here, has allowed the space for other ladies to feel comfortable coming into the program. And so our numbers over doubled. We went from 2 last year, and now we're at 6 this year. And so, you know, next year we've already got applications in for the program, and it's so sad to say that we're going to take a quarter of these applicants and accept them into the program. That's how many. So we service 9 schools in the whole area of Missouri that come to our district. We have 9 schools that we service. And so we only have space for so many. We have 24 booths out in our welding shop. And then we also have some outdoor booths and different setups where we can get the students into some, basically a simulator for a real world setting. We have the jungle gym. We got some outdoor booths. So it gets them exposed to the elements and just in that, you know, more real life like setting for welding. But it's going to be great to see the numbers of how many ladies we have in the program next year. I bet that I see a climb in it again. I bet so.
Awesome. So then what's the average age range of your students?
I have an intro class. So my intro class is consisted of sophomores. So 10th graders is what my intro class is. That's only an hour-long class. It is an introductory into welding. And so they get a small amount of information, and then we get out into the shop and weld. So it's basically for them to get exposed to it, decide, hey, this is something that I'm really interested in. I'd like to pursue it further. And then once they get done with the intro program that we offer to our homeschool students here in Mexico, then we have our junior and senior year students, and those are 3-hour programs. And they get here in the morning or in the afternoon for 3-hour block, and it goes by very quickly out in the shop. But it seems like a long time at times with the 3 hours, but overall, that's only 1,000 hours we get with them in a year. So it's like we got a lot of time to do a lot of work in, but it's not that much time at all. So it's a growing program, and one day we may even have a third instructor. The other instructor that I work with, he is a powerhouse. He's actually been in this facility he's going on his 33rd year. So he's like the heart and soul of this place. His name is Scott Ulrich. He has been an amazing mentor to have coming into a completely different side of welding, right? Being in the education side, the academic side now of things, it's a little different. I don't weld as much as I used to, dang it, Megan. I thought I was going to weld more than what I've been welding. But it's really great getting into the booth with the students and putting my hood on with them. And when they're struggling with something and they come up to me and they're like, Mrs. Ray, can you help me with this? I just can't seem to get it. I'm like, yeah, let's go. And I run one with them and they say, okay, I think I see what I need to do. And then they try and then they say, that's the best weld I've put down so far. And I'm like, that's what you need. Keep going. But yeah, I've got sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So 15, 17?
That's really, so what I'm interested in knowing, so you said that you have 9 schools that bring in the students. Do none of the schools have welding programs set up on site?
No, the majority of them, you'll see like a VOAG program, a vocational agriculture program. And so they have more times than not, those are smaller schools. And more times than not, it's like the shop class, right? So they will be experienced or exposed to a little bit of welding perhaps at their home school. But they don't have the facility or the equipment and things like that we have here. So they may have maybe a little bit of knowledge. We get several students that have zero experience with any of this stuff when they first come to us. So it really doesn't matter if they have or haven't had the experience. A lot of times they'll come in and get so mad at themselves because they struggle. And I try to remind them, this is the place for the mistakes. This is where we struggle because this is where we're learning to get better so that when you go out into the field to do the work, you'll do it right.
So do the majority of your students then, are they looking to pursue a career as a welder? Is that why they join your class? Or do some of them just come and try to test the waters and see if it's the thing for them?
I would say it's probably a 70-30 split. Probably 70% of our students come in with the mindset that this is exactly what I want to do. I just need to be shown how. Whereas the other 30%, they like the idea of learning the craft or part of the trade to where they can apply it in their own setting in their garage or something. Or even I've heard several say is something to fall back on. I think I have a student this year interested in criminal justice. And so he's looking to go into that field, but he says he still wants welding as something that he can still do, whether it's in his free time or something to fall back on. So just interesting perspectives. Each student is a little different on their goals, but they change too. Throughout the year, you'll see their goals change and their desires of, I want to go to this welding school, or I want to go to this 4-year school instead of a welding school. And then they change their mind and want to go to a welding school instead of the 4-year degree school. Or 4-year school. So it varies. Everybody's got a different perspective, but I think a lot of them will change as they're in the program.
Yeah. So why is being a welding teacher important to you? Like what sort of things do you like about it? What sort of things are you like frustrated? Because I know there's some communities where there's a massive disconnect with what's being taught at the academia level versus what's going on in the industry. And it really does take teachers who have been in the field to bring that knowledge and pass it on to the students. And I've talked to a lot of tech teachers who quit their 6-figure job to go back to teaching because they're like, there's such a need for the right talent. And some of these teachers are not getting it right. So I felt like I needed to fill that need. And just to hear the passion in their voices has been amazing. So what is it for you love about it?
Yeah. Well, as I said before, being a teacher was never something that I thought would be on my radar. So I never thought this is where I would be or what I would be doing. But truth be told, Megan, I never thought I'd be a welder. I never thought I'd travel the United States welding. And so never say never, first and foremost, because you cannot guarantee things most of the time. But as for why being an educator, especially a welding instructor, is important, I think, for one, my passion for welding, I get to now share that with other people. I get to see that first feeling, that spark that I had when I first started welding, that igniting spark of, what is this? I need to know more. I get to see that 60 times a year. I get to see that over and over again. I get to see just a passion for something that is literally going to be life-changing for these students happen. So aside from sharing my passion, just the simplicity of being where I am, I'm opening the door for our generation to perhaps, or for the younger generations to perhaps have a career in the trades. It's a very prideful industry that I don't think a lot of people recognize how prideful it is being in this kind of industry, that you get to create these things with your two hands and you get to see it be built to life and come to life. And so I tell my students all the time, I actually have it over on a dry erase board over here. It says, don't be afraid of the future, build it. And so it's something that I think is an interesting thing. They're not going to know everything that's ahead of them, and everything that they're learning in this program, they're going to learn more. There's no cap here. They're going to continue to learn. And so as long as they show up every day, they know one of my phrases is show up and show out. So I want you here every day, and I want you to be your best, right? I want you to show out. I want you to get excited when you put a good weld down. I want you to realize that you're struggling maybe in this vertical up position and that you need to work harder on it. That's okay too. This is the space to do it. Additionally, one of the other main reasons why I think being in this role is so important, especially being a woman myself, is that I can hold that space for young ladies that are in school that may have taken a tour of our welding facility and walked right out of it without a second thought to it, thinking this isn't a place for me. And I make it a point when they come through, I try to always be the one to talk to them. Our other instructor's phenomenal about pointing out, you are welcome in this shop. And that's exactly what we say to our middle schoolers or our freshmen that come walking through this program. When I see these young ladies, and I'll ask the group as a whole, hey, who's interested in welding? And there'll be a few little shy hands here and there. And I'll just straight ask, hi, are you interested in welding? Are you interested in welding? And I'll get little, yeah, or, and I'll tell them, well, I hope you know that this is a space for everyone. This isn't a gender specific place out here. Whether you're male, female, I don't care your gender. If you are willing to show up, put in the work, do the work, that doesn't matter. None of that matters. Yeah. It matters if you're coming in here and doing the work and if you're willing to put in the work. And so being a woman myself and being able to be in this position and perhaps be someone that I didn't have when I was in high school. I didn't have a lady saying, you could do this too. It was, you need to go to college, and so being able to have those conversations and open up maybe their mindset to something that they hadn't opened it up to before, I think is the seed that I can plant and let them know that this is something you can do too.
Are there certain things that you focus on specifically to maybe pull in more women? And again, I don't want this to be like male versus female, but one of the things that we talked about before, it's just nice. And I had this conversation with another friend of mine. She flat out asked me, she's like, have you ever been the only white person in the room and said to yourself, oh, am I in the right place? Like when you enter a room where you're the only one, it can be very intimidating. And she's like, I feel like with our sector, a lot of the times we're making certain individuals ask themselves, oh, am I in the right place? And she's like, we need that mentorship, especially from the men. Like we need them to encourage younger girls to get involved with these things, because without that, like you said, they'll probably walk through the room and then never walk through it again. So is there specific things that you do or focus on to really pull in younger girls instead of when they come through on tour, saying, hey, are you interested in welding? Are you interested in welding? Like, what do you do outside of your classroom to get younger girls excited about it?
Yeah, outside of the classroom, I am a huge participant and member of National Association of Women in Construction, NAWIC.
Okay.
I'm the vice president of Chapter 341 out of Central Missouri. And we host several events throughout the year where we cater to elementary school age. You know, we have block kids. So we have an event that we host where students come in and do different builds with things being creative and crafty for the industry. So I think it's just planting those seeds ahead of time, and even out of school. Like you said, what am I doing out of school? It's planting those seeds out of school, outside of the traditional setting, and letting them know just, hey, this is a possibility. Have you considered this? Do you know about this? Just opening up their perspectives to let them know that this is something that you could do. It's not limited, you know, to other people. You're fully capable of doing it. As for other items, being a multi-business owner, and then now with being in my second year of teaching and doing my teaching, my educator certification, my time is pretty limited at the moment. Prior to being an instructor, I was already teaching. I was tutoring girls. I had a 13-year-old and a 64-year-old at the time. I was tutoring both of them individually, how to weld in my own shop before getting into the school. And so I was already, you know, fulfilling that educator's role. But just the same as I said, it's those seeds of things that you can talk about or do with people that kind of plant the idea for them where they can grow into themselves and find that this is a path that they like, that this is a trade that they love.
I think it's really cool that you're teaching multiple generations too, because there's a lot of, I think with older people, when you hit a certain age, you feel like, oh, my life is over and I can't start over and no one's going to, like, so old. But you hear more and more now, especially among women, where they're like, I don't like this career anymore. I'm going to switch gears and try this out. So it's cool that you tutored somebody in their 60s. My brother's a good example. He is almost 50 and he hated his job. So like 2-3 years ago now, he got his welding certification and he absolutely loves it. He's just like, I wish I would have done this sooner because it's more fun. I'm going to start my own fabrication shop soon and do things that I like, pick my own hours. And he absolutely loves it. So it's like, never think that it's too late. I do want to talk about that. You mentioned like your journey of like starting in the office and then you were going through your certifications. Can you give a timeline of how long that took for when you first took your class to actually become a certified welder? Because I think it's important to know that timeline because like you, I was pushed to go to 4-year college. And I ended up going for like 8 years because I have my master's. I'm still in debt. Like a writer's not like the prime of all jobs where you're making a ton of money as a writer, just to be frank to everybody who wants to be a writer. But you said welding makes good money. So like, what was the timeline from you starting to getting your certification? And like, what does that look like? Because
it is
I don't want to
different.
ask how much money you make because that's just rude. But I'm just saying, like, you said the money's good. So it's like,
well, imagine a good range. So I'll give you just a base here too. So when I first started office and then I got into being a fire watch, as a fire watch, if I were to have been employed for a whole year as a fire watch, my hourly was $18 an hour and $125 a day per diem. So I was making $18 an hour a day and then $125 a day per diem. And where we were working at the time, we were working 7 days a week. So the deal was if we showed up to work all 7 days, they pay us a 10-day sub. So we would actually receive per diem for 10 days. So we'd get an extra 3 days of non-tax. It's non-tax per diem. And so starting out at $18 an hour and then $125 a day per diem. I've been with companies that paid $80 a day per diem. instead of the 125, right? So the per diem will vary from company to company or state to state, but for time frame as well. So I remember I started in the winter months in Alexander, North Dakota, freezing. I got my eyes open to what I was going to be experiencing. And if I wasn't going to make it, I wouldn't have made it the first year. So I knew I was going to be okay. But let's see, I started around December, and then by June of that year, so about a 6-month time frame, I was getting ready to take my first structure test. And then I believe it was by that fall. So I think within about 8 months, I took my first structure test. And my first test, I should tell you, my first test was actually a TIG test, and I failed. That was my test. I failed my first one. I was like, step her back a little bit, maybe not pipe first. Let me do some structure welding. And so, started doing more of that and passed it. But I would say about 8 months from having zero experience, not knowing anything about the industry, coming in as a office, but then to fire watch and then helper, and then working as a fire watch and a helper for those months leading up to, like I said, practicing in any of my downtime until I felt confident enough to take a test. So I attribute that to being a very quick learner. You show me how to do something and I'm going to do it. You might have to show me twice, but I'm going to get it. I'm very confident in abilities and knowing that even if I've never done something, I'm going to do it well. You just maybe got to show me once. And so I think that helped me with being able to have some confidence going into things that I didn't have a lot of experience in. But within an 8-month time frame, I went from having zero experience or work in the industry to being a certified structural welder with AWS D11 certifications. And then that's where I had to have more. I just kept going more and more and more. And now I got to weld on pipe now. It's not structure anymore. Now it has to be pipe. And you just keep going. And as we talked about with money, 18 and 125 was around the range with Firewatch, and then helper was typically between like the $20 to $24 range, $26 range, depending on where you're working, plus your per diem. Structure welder was typically around that 28 to 32. And then pipe welder a little it just keeps going. The more certifications you have and experiences, of course.
Well, and there's also those opportunities where the really dangerous ones, like the underwater welding, or if you're out on the gas industry, like, have you seen those videos of the guys hanging and like the water's just piling over them? They're just sitting there welding. Like, you can make up to 6 figures just depending on like where you're at and what type of welder you're doing. It's crazy. I would say no to that kind of thing. It's like, that's just too scary for me, but it's good money and you don't have to go to school very long to do it, which is the point I'm trying to get across for some, because school isn't for everyone. Like, it's not.
That's a great point, Meg. That's absolutely true. And something that I have talked a lot with my students about, and they've gone home and had these conversations with their parents because their parents don't understand that. In most parents' mindsets, their child has to go to college to be able to have a worthy life for a career, right? And it's terrible that that's the conversation. I wish the conversation at the dinner table could change. I wish the conversation could be more of, you're going to have a job one day, right? As a member of society, we all need a job. So if more of us did more of the things we actually liked, maybe society could move along a little better. I love welding, so I lucked out. I'm one of the lucky ones. But I think a lot of people are stuck where they don't want to be. Your brother, for instance, who's now welding after all these years, so you kind of get stuck where you are. But I don't know. I think just being brave enough to say, hey, I'm going to switch it up. I need to do something that's going to be worth my time. But being in college, some people are going for a degree that they're not even going to use. It's interesting to see these things. And then you're going to spend how much money, and then you're going to go into debt for a job you might not even get, and spend how many years and how much money. Whereas a lot of my students, I have a student last year after they graduated from this program right out of high school, They didn't even go to a post-secondary welding school, which, on average, you can do like 2 to 4 months, and that's pretty adequate for what you would need to be able to get into industry and be sufficient what you're doing. You're always going to keep learning. But think of that. Think of a typical bachelor's degree, a 4-year degree, where you're hoping to come out making 6 figures, close to 6 figures, or take a program that's 4 months. So 4 years or 4 months.
Right.
Time frame here of what you have to put in. And then on average, I want to say that my students are spending anywhere from like 18 to 30,000 right now for a 4-month program at times. That sounds like a lot, but within a few months after being out in the industry, you're going to have that paid off. 30,000 is going to be way less than $100,000 of debt from a traditional 4-year school. Right. And I never had those conversations with anyone growing up. And so I'm glad you mentioned that.
They don't have those conversations in school either. And there's all this pressure to be like a contributing citizen when you're still a kid and you still want to like run around and have fun. And it's a lot of pressure. And the other thing is too, what they don't talk about is sometimes with these 4-year degrees that you won't be using, or even the ones that you could use, you're spending so much time in school versus getting that hybrid of the education and the hands-on, that when the 4-year college students come out into the real world, they're walking around lost because they don't really have that hands-on experience to be confident in their skill set. Where if you're doing something like welding or CNC machining and getting that hands-on experience with the academic side of things, you have more confidence going in the field because you've already had the hands. My daughter, for instance, she's becoming a nurse. Her first year, she hated because it was all the general stuff that she had to take to get to the next level, had nothing to do with what she wanted to do as a traveling surgical nurse. So she put it out of her mind, and she's like, I'm failing this class, I'm doing this class, like I have a C in this class. I'm like, just try to get C's so you can get to the next level. Well, now that she's in the nursing school and she's getting hands-on with the patients and she's doing all the things that's what she wanted to do, she's passing with like flying colors and she loves it. But it's like, okay, well, she would have like did all these other general classes before she got in the nursing program and then just throw her in. She would have been scared to like interact with the patients and engage with them. So I think hands-on is so important to any level of education that you pursue. Like you have to have that hands-on experience and get into the actual industry you want to get into. Because if you don't, you're just going to freeze up and be nervous and not do well.
You need that exposure. Yeah, you need that experience. Absolutely. That's something that I rave about with being in a career center, a CTE program, a career and technical education program. With a CTE class, the majority of the classes down here, they are mostly hands-on. And it's down here that I have to make sure that the students know we're also minds-on, because they think that we're only hands-on down here a lot of times. They think at the high school, they're in the classroom, they're learning. Down here, they're doing with their hands. Well, in order to do properly with our hands, we need to know the why and the what and the how. And so I tell them a lot of times we're minds-on and hands-on. Wednesdays is Math Wednesdays in my classroom with them. Reading a tape measure should be a little more fluent for most people. And then in this industry, it's prominent. You better know how to read a tape measure accurately. We're not talking ticks or hashes or little lines here. You need to know what those mean. And so, I mean, I have stations set up around my room right now where we did a measurement assessment and they need to go through and give me a length and width on measurements. And I make a measure down to a 32nd of an inch with things because I want accuracy. I want them to know what they're looking at. I want them to be the best person on a tape measure their job has ever seen, because it's not just about welding anymore. As a welder on a job site, you have other duties. And if you can help your fabricator or if you're your own fitter, you got to know how to read that tape measure. So we're really minds-on as well. But the hands-on, they love that part of it. That's what they rave about with the program, is the fact that we're really hands-on.
Right. But the minds part's going to help them be a better welder and be at the top. So that's really cool. So then what are some of the things that you're working on for the future? You mentioned a few things before we got on here. So what are you excited about for the rest of this year?
Well, while we were talking about that, I realized I didn't mention something earlier either. I mentioned NAWIC earlier, so National Association of Women in Construction. The beginning of May is the Midwest Region Spring Conference. That will be in Branson, Missouri. And I was asked to be on a Tradeswoman panel with them. So I'm not sure exactly. I know one of the other ladies is a tile setter. And so I already, know the other trade woman on there. I think there may be another one or two that will be joining us. So there'll be a great conversation that we'll be having about women in industry then. And then something that I am super excited about that is just kind of coming to fruition here. Every other year, the Hobart Institute of Welding Technology out of Troy, Ohio, hosts a conference during the summer for educators. And this year's is the Educators Welding Conference. And they asked if I would come and do a presentation and speak to the other instructors about women in industry, perhaps some of my experiences, things that I could share about ways we could help retain more women in industry. What we're seeing is that we're getting more and more ladies in our programs now, whereas in the past, we weren't getting them in the program. So we're starting to see an influx of women coming into these programs in the secondary setting, so in high school. And then they're even going into the post-secondary settings for welding. So state colleges, community colleges, tech schools, and things like that. But what we're now also seeing is that once they get into industry, they're not staying. They're leaving for some reason. Women don't have a good retention. Once we go through the school, once we go through the training, they're leaving the industry. So something that they really want me to highlight are ways that we could try to help with that. And, some of those ideas are, of course, environment and culture. Are we making sure that these people are comfortable being here? If you're not comfortable in a space, you're probably not going to come back to it. And then you mentioned earlier as well with having our male allies and things, mentorship with them. Those are huge, huge, huge things that can be invaluable for a woman going into an industry like this, where she's not going to see many other women like her there. So having those allies are detrimental. So long-winded there with that. But one of the great things that I'm doing in June is going to Hobart to give a presentation to some of our nation's welding instructors. And then I also will have lunch with I believe I was told it's their first ever welding instructor that is a female that they have at Hobart. And then it's also the largest class of ladies that Hobart has had. So I get to sit down and have lunch with them and talk with them and just share experiences, share the battle wounds and what we can do to keep each other thriving and succeeding in this industry. But besides that, I hope to also be seeing you in the fall, right? Are you going to be at Empowering Women in Industry this year?
Yes, I'm super excited because I've never been to New Orleans before.
Yes.
So it would be my first time in New Orleans. I'm going to be submitting an abstract too, so I'm hoping I get to speak again. But there's so many other women that I've heard are coming to the event, and I want them to get picked too, because I know they have a lot of good insights into the industry, and it'll be good either way. But I'm super excited because I just heard New Orleans is a great place to be for music and food and the people. Like the people are just fantastic. So I can't wait. I'm super excited. And last year's event was really awesome and a huge eye opener for me. And it really helped like build up my confidence in some of the things that I was doing. Cause like you hit these influxes in your journey and there's points in your life where you're like, man, am I doing the right thing? Am I fine? Like, is this really meant to be for me? Am I really meant to do this? And that kind of reconfirmed for me that I am doing the right thing. So,
and Megan,
for anyone,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Megan, weren't you recognized? Were you recognized last year? What were you recognized for?
I have to be comfortable with that because I don't toot my own horn most of the time because I shrivel up and like disappear for a minute. But I believe it was Industry Advocacy of the Year, which was really such a high honor for me. So it's recognizing a woman who is uplifting other women in the industry and really putting a spotlight on other women and just connecting them. And that's what I took as it meant. So I was really honored to
Yes.
receive that. It was awesome. I cried several times, which I don't like doing, but definitely had a
It's that happy emotion. It comes out with it.
I was like, I think one of my friends caught me like ugly crying too. And I was just like, we're going to delete that photo. And then she's like, oh no, I'm saving it for a special occasion. And I'm like, I'm kind of mad at you right now, but I get it. I get it. So, well, DeIla, this was awesome. And I am so grateful for you sharing your story here. And I definitely, and I'm going to be interested in hearing what comes up from that conversation about, you know, women and retaining them, because I feel like that's across the board in male dominated industries. Like there is a huge retention problem, but even now within manufacturing, there's a retention problem with everyone. Like everyone is like leaving for different reasons. And, you know, we really got to be our own cheerleaders and try to figure out how to not only attract people into our industries, but also how to keep them, because the way we used to work back in the day isn't the same. And this younger generation, they have some really strict core value. I don't want to say strict as a negative, but they're really into their core values and they want certain things and they're demanding certain things. And if they don't get them, they're not shy to just be like, okay, see you later, and go somewhere
That's
else. Like
way there. Yep.
yeah,
Gen
it's
Z,
very
Zoomers. Yep. Oh yeah. We were actually talking about generations here just recently about how they learn differently. And they were saying, you're like, well, Mrs. Ray, if I don't like it, I'm not going to do it. I said, okay.
You're like, that's different. If I didn't like it and my parents wanted me to do it, I would be in trouble if I told them no. Like,
yeah.
And it, yeah. But I did want to ask you one last question. If you had an ask for our audience, what would your biggest ask be for them?
My biggest ask for the audience would be, are you being the supporter you should be for the people around you? I ask my students all the time, would you hire yourself? So another way to look at it is, are you being the biggest supporter of those around you? And, you know, if you're not willing to get a little uncomfortable for somebody to help make them be comfortable in what they're doing, I don't know. I feel like we could all probably do a little more to step up and help those around us, whether it's somebody at work or your neighbor. We all get really wrapped up in our day to day. You and I were talking before this, how we take on a lot of things and sometimes your plate gets a little heavy. But it's still important to make sure that you're not only doing for yourself. I know that's important. I put myself last. I'm learning about myself, right? But are you doing things for others? Are you being a good supporter of those around you and the things that you're passionate about? I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope you are. Or work on it if you're not.
That reminds me of a keynote that I saw recently at 3D Experience World. Her name is Anissa, and she's amazing. She's from Illinois. And she was talking about diversifying and empowering versus diversifying and dividing. And she was just like, at the end of her speech, she's like, I challenge all of you here to pray for the people that don't you, like keep them in your, so anyone that's different from you, keep them in your prayers. And it was just such a powerful statement. It's like, that's so cool. And she had a lot of people come up to her and like thank her for saying that. But yeah, I think if we would just look at each other and be their biggest supporters, the world would be a lot better place. So thank you for that. Well, DeIla, how can people reach out to you and get in touch with you if they have any questions?
So you can reach out to me on my Instagram. That is my first name dot last name. So you see it right there. DeIla.Ray is where you can find me out on Instagram. I'm not exceptionally active with posting, but when I have questions, I'll oftentimes get on there. If not, you can also reach me on my LinkedIn. They don't make it easy to share what your LinkedIn handle is. It's got all the interesting numbers in it and stuff, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't know if you can see my picture there. but you can look
And
me
I'll
up
make
there.
sure. Yeah, I'll make sure to tag you too on the post that I do to promote the episode so
Yeah.
people will be able to find you.
Yeah.
But well, thank you again, DeIla. It was so nice to see you, and I'm excited to see you again in New Orleans because again, it's going to be a great city to party with everybody that we know there. And Charlie does a great job with that event. So anyone who is tuning in today, thank you so much. Be sure to connect with DeIla, especially if you're a welder, or if you have a daughter that wants to be a welder, connect them because she is the person to really inspire them to get that confidence to do something they might not think is the place to be for them. So stay tuned because we do have a message from our sponsor today, Sandvik. I want to thank them. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks again. Happy International Women's Day. Bye.
Thank you.
The power of habits. Quietly present in our day-to-day, yet paramount in the pursuit of progress. To stay competitive in manufacturing, businesses must dare to adopt new habits to constantly fine-tune, optimize, and evolve. Cutting costs, mastering technology, simplifying complexities. It's about driving resilient change, about looking at challenges holistically, meeting them calmly, responsibly, and with purpose. This is how we work with our customers and partners every day. This is what we call manufacturing wellness. It's a set of healthy habits built from decades of experience and collaboration that shape thriving, sustainable businesses. Manufacturing wellness. Creating value today while gearing up for the future.